Hey there, hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk about how I experience complex post traumatic stress. So it's stress from my past that resurfaces in the present, and it seems very real, but ultimately it's triggered from past trauma. And one of my roles growing up in my family was to be a peacemaker and a peace bringer. And often I would break up the fights between my parents. Um, One I remember, I was dead asleep. It was a school night, and I heard my parents yelling violently, threatening my father, threatening my mother's life. And I jumped out of bed. I was on the lower bunk bed. My sister was on the upper. I jumped out of bed and opened the door and I screamed, "Stop!" Because my father had his hands above his head and a shiny object in them. And my mother was on the floor on her knees, pleading with my father to not take her life. So I screamed and then I blacked out. And that trauma was retriggered in adult life. I was working on a business deal. I was brokering talent. I used to match celebrities with brands, and there was a very large corporate merger. And my job was to bring all the talent to the table. They had huge bands playing, like major household names playing. And I was in between two parties brokering these deals. And what happened was the same trauma of trying to mend my parents fighting and their fights was triggered. And I went into a deep clinical depression. And ultimately, I had to be hospitalized because I couldn't separate the trauma from the past, from the present. And I'm grateful for that experience that I had as a young adult being hospitalized for clinical depression because I learned about what it is to be clinically depressed, so much to the point that I needed a hospitalization. I learned what it feels like when I'm suicidal and what I need to do to take care of myself. And so ultimately, decades later, I went through my own marriage dissolving, which was completely traumatic. I didn't want my marriage to fail like my parents had. And obviously, that triggered some post traumatic stress. But what I was capable of as my own marriage was disintegrating was to stay in the moment. I knew the red flags. So what happens for me is I'll feel very cold. I'll feel deeply afraid. It almost doesn't even match the moment. So I'll take an inventory of where I am to get into the now, into that present moment, to know that I'm not that 6-year-old trying to break up my parents' fights. I'm not that 29-year-old in a hospital trying to stave off suicidal urges. And I'm not that person working her way out of a very difficult and toxic marriage. So getting in the now is really important. And then to soothe myself emotionally. So oftentimes what I'll do is some kind of somatic work. That means going into your body and feeling the sensations. It could be through meditation. It could be playing an instrument. It could be getting outside for a change of perspective and scenery in nature. But what I do oftentimes in the moment is breathe in faith and blow out fear. And for some reason, that dumbs down the trauma. It turns down the volume on the trauma. And it gives me some kind of semblance of soothing and clarity. And I just keep repeating that, blowing in faith, blowing out fear. And you can do any words that really work for you. But that's what's really helped me. And so I hope this video has helped you. Share it with somebody that might need it. Subscribe if my stuff resonates. And I'm really glad that we're in this together. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take good care.